Hello and welcome to the show. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today we're going to talk about antidepressants, gut and brain health, and the connection between your gut and your brain and the food that you're eating that create your moods. But we're going to take it a little further than that. We're going to include emotions, and we're going to include hormones, and we're going to include lifestyle choices, and we're going to include habits and patterns. And this episode is a long time coming. It's something I'm passionate about because all too often people are out there numbing things that are masking symptoms and problems within your health and your body that you otherwise won't discover until you actually look a little deeper underneath the surface. And the whole masking and numbing thing actually isn't working out for most people because they end up having other side effects like weight gain or fogginess or things that they don't want. So actually, a lot of people aren't even getting relief from some of the drugs that they're taking long term because it's not actually addressing the real issues. Today, Jeanne and I talk a little bit deeper about nutrition and, again, gut and brain health. And we have a more fleshed out session that she did at the Next Big Step last year. And I will make that available in 2020 as a downloadable product that you can get and go through and learn from. I will be covering some of this at Releasing What Weighs You Down in January at 1440 Multiversity, which is the 10th through the 12th at 1440. And you can learn more about the event at releasingwhatweighsyoudown.com. I want to make today just a little extra push for those of you that are on the edge of coming to Releasing What Weighs You Down. Like I've said before, it's being hosted at a new place, and I don't know that we'll be doing it again. So I really encourage you, if you're interested, please do not wait. Sign up now. Come to releasingwhatweighsyoudown.com, check it out, and then it will direct you to the sign-up page that you can register at 1440. The situation at 1440 is you pay for a ticket that covers everything. So nothing goes through me, it all goes through them. And everything is included in the price that you pay online with whatever you choose. And so the rooms and the different pricing for the rooms isn't going to get any cheaper. It's because the availability will become less and less the closer we get to January. So if you're on the fence or if you know you want to come, please take the leap today and sign up. It's come to releasingwhatweighsyoudown.com. I did offer some bonuses on another show. So if you just forward me your registration from 1440, then you will be getting about $500 worth of bonuses. I just want to make sure you get the best price and the best room and the best situation, as well as get your bonuses now so we can use them and get you on the path to healing faster and prepared for an amazing event and an epic 2020. So you know Jeanne Peters, she's been on the show before many, many times. She'll be back again. And I want to tell you a little bit about her in case you haven't heard from Jeanne before. Jeanne teaches on how to optimize your food and lifestyle habits to improve your hormone health. She is a mind, body, spirit nutritionist who brings medical science with ancient food wisdom in her novel approach to food, mindful eating, and weight management. She specializes in optimizing women's hormone health, digestive and thyroid disorders, and how to break through weight loss resistance. She co-founded the Nourishing Wellness Medical Center with partner Dr. Alan Peters, who specializes in bioidentical hormone health and homeopathy for men and women. She was voted California Dietitian of the Year by her colleagues for her nutritional expertise and was recently certified in clinical homeopathy by the Center for Education in Clinical Homeopathy. Welcome back to the show, Jeanne.
Great to be here, JJ.
All right, today's topic, we're going to get down and dirty. This is a really important topic for me because like you, and like I actually believe I learned from you and Dr. Allen, when years ago, he was diagnosed as being depressed when this is what led you on the path that you're on right now. He knew he wasn't really depressed and taking an antidepressant wasn't the answer. He learned that he had adrenal fatigue and he needed hormones.
Yes.
And this is really, I remember the story very well. And I know that too many people get prescribed antidepressants when I believe they're unnecessary for multiple reasons. And in the last several years, you've been diving into gut health and the connection between the gut and the brain. And we did a whole talk on it at Releasing What Weighs You Down in 2019 that I will repurpose later. So for those of you that want to get more involved and go through this, besides, of course, reaching out to Jeannie Peters at nourishingwellness.com and working with her one-on-one, today's show is really about covering this idea that when someone diagnoses you as being depressed or someone puts you on meds, this is one option that isn't being explored properly from my opinion and from, I believe, Jeannie's opinion. And so we're looking at how food affects and how the gut affects your brain. And then in turn, of course, that brain health affects your mood and your emotions. So I want to give you all another opportunity, another option for you to explore to get off these meds and to possibly even heal what's really ailing you in the first place. So Jeannie, let's go backwards here and explain the gut-brain connection. What led you down this path? What have you been discovering? Let's go through step by step.
Sure. Well, I would say that getting back to the story about Doc, it's a good story because at the time, I mean, he was incredibly fatigued. He was tired. He had been an ER doc for years and years. And so when he went to his colleagues to try to, determine, what is it that I need? What they basically prescribed him was a antidepressant. Well, a happy pill is not what he was deficient in. He was not deficient, in Prozac, which is what they gave him. What he was struggling with was, a hormonal imbalance and some inflammation. When you work in the ER, you tend to eat, crummy foods. So to answer your question about, the gut brain, one of the things that we know is that the gut is like, and the gut, when we think of the gut, think of everything from your mouth to your anus. It's a long tube, it's close to 30 feet long. So that tube is what separates, the food from, the environment of your body. And it's up to the gut to break those foods down properly and to digest them and then to turn those ingredients into the nutrients that then become your brain chemicals. So, for example, your serotonin, your GABA, your dopamine, all of these chemicals that help you to have self-efficacy, to think, to be able to access information in a clear and concise way, to be able to feel calm or to feel relaxed, your anti-anxiety chemicals, they're all available to us. We can create a whole pharmacy of chemicals if we're able to go ahead and properly break down our foods. What's becoming clear to us is that, the way that we're growing our foods, their agricultural methods, the ultra refining of foods has really created like havoc. It's like we have this evolutionary mismatch in which we're, producing foods that just didn't exist 100 years ago. And so it's playing, a lot, it's wreaking a lot of havoc and inflammation on the gut. So, genetic modification or your pesticides or overprocessing or, all these industrial chemicals that we're exposed to, it's breaking that gut wall down in such a way that that fortress that used to be there is no longer there. One other thing to add to that, JJ, is that our gut actually is also the house for like 85 to 90% of our immune forces. We have forces that go to work for us. And so they're being disrupted. And then finally, being on, many antibiotics or even just eating meats, poultry, foods that are produced in feedlots where it's common practice to give these animals, very high doses of antibiotics is making us more and more antibiotic resistant. And even those antibiotics are finding their way into the gut in such a way that they're breaking that gut wall down. You could throw in vaccinations and, sedentary lifestyle. And I mean, it's all of that is creating an issue right now where our moods are being impacted by the quality of the foods that we're eating. It's being impacted by the lining of the gut. And the gut has this beautiful bidirectional pathway that runs through from the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve connects the gut all the way to the brain. So you've heard the sign, eat crappy foods, feel crappy. Well, that's probably truer than not. So, when we're eating, not great foods and we're getting a lot of inflammation in the body, our moods are probably less than optimum. On the other hand, the gut is the fastest healing tissue in the body. So often in just making changes in 3 to 4 days, we've seen patients feel better and have better thoughts. So that's kind of simplifying it greatly, but I think it's a good place and a good paradigm to work with for now.
Well, we had talked about a few myths that people have and believe related to depression and anxiety. And if you're listening to the show and you've been a fan for a while, you know I've done several shows on anxiety. Anxiety is not a feeling. It's actually a body sensation that lets you know that you have an emotion that needs to be expressed, something that needs to be worked out. And in terms of depression, there are three kinds of depression. And the one that people think is their issue, or that the most common one is actually a chemical brain imbalance. And that's actually not true. So
Yes.
let's talk about, though, that chemical brain imbalance and the fact that people think they need medication.
Well, again, neuroscience is still a really young science, and it really hasn't yet completely defined, what a balanced brain looks like, or how to assess one. So how do we claim to create it with drugs, right? So in many cases, psychiatric symptoms that are being being identified and are being treated are just symptoms. I mean, they're just basic, like you said. They're maybe their feeling states or their sensations, and they're giving us clues that maybe the body's out of balance, and that we should be paying more attention to looking at, like, how do we reset our lifestyle choices, or how do we reset our sleep, or how do we take care of the three biggest inflammatory contributors to our lifestyle, which are often our food choices, probably being number one. So drugs, what they do is they tend to suppress the symptoms. They're doing nothing to address the reasons you're feeling lousy. So pharmaceutical solutions are really, they're not evidence-based. They're not always, the psychiatrists that are practicing today, many of them are not going through and doing the proper lab work and blood work to be able to see what might also be going on with this client. They're not doing the gut studies or looking at their brain chemicals. They're not maybe looking at their lifestyle, their food choices. So, it's when we go ahead and give these medications, we're not really addressing and fixing the root causes. And to follow up with that, I mean, we know that many of these drugs really not only do they not resolve the underlying cause, but they can actually create a chemically induced new normal, which is anything but normal. So, for example, putting a client on, let's say, an antidepressant, let's say that doesn't really help. Maybe it actually makes matters worse. I remember with Doc, they put him on Prozac. He returned a week later. He said he felt horrible. And the doctor's first thought was, well, you just need to give it more time. You need to give it. It usually doesn't kick in for 3 more weeks. It takes about 3 weeks. Well, that right there, once you start a patient on an antidepressant, you're playing roulette, because what the literature and the research is showing is that these patients, they actually create now new symptoms. And so now you're dealing with more of a milieu where it's a little bit more challenging to treat, and you may have, you have to, as a clinician, go the distance to be able to really see how can we help this patient, and that's not what's being done in our culture right now in terms of traditional medicine.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I and a lot of the people that I talk with and podcast with really support functional medicine, because it's looking at so many different parts and pieces versus deciding that I don't feel well. I had a client recently, a client that you and I both share, who's been to an event and actually has worked with everyone. And she has been having this out of body experience, if you will. Like, she's been feeling so uncomfortable in her body. And when we went through the list of things that it could be, I started with hormones, and she recently had her hormones checked and everything was good. Her doctor said everything was great. Okay, check, done. Then we moved to her food. She's been eating very cleanly. She's been doing fasting. She's been doing a little bit low carb. She said her food was really good. Okay, check. So now we're getting down to the reason why she's so uncomfortable in her body is because, as a person that used to repress her feelings through food, we discovered that it's just her emotions. Like literally her emotions are making her feel uncomfortable because she's
Mm-hmm.
not letting them out. And she's looking at, what can I take? What's off in my body? When it
Yes,
really just is the need to express the emotions. But I want
absolutely.
to do the
Yeah.
reverse on this, because most of the time people are jumping to, I need some meds to feel calmer, to feel better, to make better decisions. And they're not looking at what we just went through of, where are your hormones? What are you eating? What's your food like? And then
Yeah.
addressing it from that vantage point, which is one of the reasons why I love the work that you and Doc are doing, which is why I have you on the show a million times, because it's the fact that we want to empower people to look at all of the different players that create whatever the experience is that you're having. And too often we misdiagnose ourselves, thinking, I'm so uncomfortable, I need to go to the doctor. And then to address the symptom, somebody like a psychiatrist is giving them a med to calm them, but like you said, is actually numbing what's really going on. So we're not actually fixing the problem. And then there's the sheer aspect of, we possibly could be creating a new problem.
Oh yeah, the journey back. Once a patient has started, using an antidepressant, can be so fraught that it's frequently patients will relapse if they try to wean themselves off. And for some patients, this can be in a very short period of time. So taking meds, you're much more likely to relapse, and you can end up so much worse than you were before you started. So it is definitely a slippery slope. It's one of those things that if you're listening to this podcast and you're somebody who's feeling out of balance and you're definitely struggling and you think that maybe an antidepressant could help improve you, just know that the research is not showing that to be true. They've done placebo work where they've actually worked with clients, a double-blind placebo-controlled crossover study in which the patients don't know whether they're getting the antidepressant or they're getting an inactive substance like saline. And what they found, in several of these studies is that the antidepressants outperformed maybe the placebo only in about maybe 18 of the 46 trials, so less than half. And then when they actually did the meta-analysis, so they looked at the differences between the two, there was maybe really only a 10% difference between the placebo and the antidepressant in terms of its efficacy. So, some of these, Celexa, Wellbutrin, Effexor, Zoloft, a lot of these patients, after 12 months of being on that, only 3% of those patients can say that they felt better than they did before they started after 12 months. Many of those patients might feel good in the first couple of months because in many of these antidepressants, you're providing a serotonin release, so people will actually get this sense of well-being. But after a period of time, these antidepressants, they don't tend to work as effectively. So, then docs are having to look at maybe switching people out. Or so the point is, the upside benefit of a lot of those meds comes with, I think, a hefty downside risk. So, there's a lot of side effects that these patients get when they're on these medications. A lot of them, they feel, like you just said, they feel numb, or they don't feel like they can access, or they no longer feel like they can cry, but they also no longer feel like that sense of joy. So, it's kind of tampering down our emotional diversity, which is what makes us human, right, JJ? It's like the greater variety of emotions, the more we feel true as humans. So I think, antidepressants come with a big, big downside risk.
One of the reasons I wanted to do today's show is because I know countless people, especially women, who go on an antidepressant and gain weight. And then they are going into their menopausal years, they're not on hormones, and now they're gaining more weight. And they're really frustrated because they think they're going to diet their way out of the situation when we're not going to. So I wanted to address, and for those of you that are listening that are working with someone, you're on meds, of course, Jeannie and I are not telling you to get off your meds necessarily,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
We're giving you information for you to take back to your doctors or for you to take on your own and do something about it. One of the things that I know, when you mentioned this to me years ago, I'm talking like probably 10 years ago, when you mentioned that Senesco test. And I remember thinking, well, that's brilliant. We're going to test someone's neurotransmitters to see whether or not those are off before giving somebody meds, or to supplement in a way to help shift those neurotransmitters so they can have a better experience and mood. And we're not going to go down the path yet of pharmaceuticals for emotion and enhancing and suppressing. And I talked about that test. I gave that pamphlet to so many different people, not having taken the test, because again, I believed in its
Right.
mission. And then recently having taken the test. So let's talk about if someone's out there and they would like more information. Let's talk about those tests that you would recommend someone do in order to find out where a possible imbalance would be.
Well, first of all, I just want you to understand what you're testing for. So in the Senesco test, there's two parts. One is testing cortisol. So you're testing your fight or flight hormone that is produced in your adrenal glands, and you take it 4 times over the course of a day with the intent of being able to see if some of the issues that you're dealing with, like, the person that feels tired but wired, they can't fall asleep at night, or they're just dragging to get their body out of bed in the morning. They just feel like I can't get going, so they think they have an energy problem. Well, it's really to give you this black and white evidence if that's the case. So cortisol is one of those beautiful hormones that your body starts producing about 10 o'clock at night. It continues to produce it up until about 8 o'clock in the morning is when it peaks, JJ. That's when you should have your maximum, and then that cortisol is there to take you through your day and to provide you with the energy to get through your day. And the idea would be that it starts to gently fall, like after dinner and right about bedtime, you're at a place where your body is able to fall into a better sleep if you're under ideal conditions. So that's one part of the test. The second part of the test is to take a look at some of the classic chemicals that your gut produces, and that travels up through this vagus nerve to the brain to be able to produce feelings of like well-being. So that would be your serotonin, and your GABA is like your body's natural anti-anxiety chemical. Dopamine is the one that gives you this feeling of reward. It's also the one that produces self-efficacy, like when you get projects done that you have to get done, and you're able to do that in a timely way. And dopamine's also, heavily responsible for learning. So we tend to see it lower in people that maybe have learning disorders or possibly even ADD and ADHD, where people can't focus on a task. Dopamine can often be low. So this test was really designed to see how much of those brain chemicals are you excreting at night. And when the levels are low, it's more or less reflecting what your stores are. Let's just say like your bank account is of these brain chemicals. And when the levels are very low, it could be a number of different things. One being, maybe you've got way more on your plate than your body is able to produce the chemicals to keep up. Or maybe you've got a problem with digestion and you're just not breaking down your proteins properly enough so that you're able to produce the amino acids that then make these chemicals. So for example, like GABA and dopamine. Dopamine is made almost exclusively from L-tyrosine, which is an amino acid. Well, maybe somebody's just not getting enough of that. But the point is, once we get the test results back, we're going to know more. We're going to have this black and white evidence that will help people to see. And I've done this on children. I've done it on teens and, all the way to elder adults. It gives us a chance to reflect and say, hey, this is what's going on. Does this feel like you? And I can tell you, I've probably done 300 of these tests, and it's rare that I ever find somebody who says, oh my God, I cannot, because they do a complete story. They take all of your symptoms and they write a 4-page report. I rarely find anybody who doesn't feel validated, like, yes, this is really reflecting what my experience is. So right there, we have a starting point where we can now start looking more deeply at what are some of the things that we can quickly fix, and what are some of the things that we want to do maybe more long term. And that gives people a sense of hope, that they don't have to be on a medication necessarily, that there's other ways to fix this problem. So it's really looking at more the root cause, JJ.
Well, we're looking at the root cause on a biochemical level. of the things
Yes,
that get in the
true.
way, right? Because again, we can, so like with this client that I just mentioned, right? So I went through the biochemical things. I went through the hormone, the endocrine system, how are the hormones, they're great. Recently had them checked, look at the food. I'm eating really cleanly. So what do we have left? Well, now it's just emotions. Like now it
Yeah.
truly is that you are uncomfortable because you're trying to control some emotions that need to be expressed. And we are
Yes.
a culture that doesn't express. We are addicted beyond belief to so many different things to numb ourselves. And we have not been taught how to process our feelings.
Yes.
And so people are, again, misreading their symptoms of I don't feel right in my body as there's something wrong with my body, versus the body telling you you have a lot of energy that needs to be expressed. And so again, this is a situation where she's worked with you, she's worked with me, she's worked with Lisa, and now I know the full picture, and she has up to date labs. So now we can say this is really emotional. And knowing her astrology, she's a Virgo, you know who you
Mm.
are. It's saying, okay, this is you, for years and years and years, you have suppressed all of your feelings, which is why this is a new thing for you. And while it's uncomfortable, it's good because now we can learn how to let it go and use the
Yes.
different sciences of the brain and different ways with emotions to actually process what's really going on. But again, because there are too many people who are medicated, not processing what's going on, and then not looking at their gut health or their hormones, is why we're having this show today. So we're going to start off with this test. This neurotransmitter test is one of the recommendations that you take to your doctor, or you call and do with Jeanne, because she can do it with you anywhere. And you're going to look at how this can affect your current situation and to see what's really low for you. Now let's move to the
Can I
gut.
just can I just answer something? Because I wanted to just address something that you just said that I think is really powerful. Because I think, what's happening in our culture right now is that psychiatry as a guild is just making this strong effort to legitimize that, we have these chemical imbalances. But, there was a woman several years ago that wrote a book called, I forget what the name of it is. It was Dr. Candace Pert, Molecules of Emotion. And she was showing that, so often what we're dealing with is, not chemical imbalances, but sometimes the chemicals that occur because we're not living our life in balance. And part of that balance is just finding a way to process stuff as it comes up. Just like we digest our food, and if we don't properly give ourselves the right environment to break our foods down in a calm environment, hopefully, so that we're able to fulfill and provide these basic substrates to make these brain chemicals. The same can be true when we're just, we're maybe a victim of somebody who's regards some of these troublesome emotions, and we just want to, like you said, tamp it down, and we don't want to feel them. And so we start pumping out like maybe some of these anxiety producing effects. And so that becomes its own problem. And what Candace was really doing in some of her landmark work was just looking at the science between the mind and the body, and how when we don't process stuff and it gets backed up, like literally some of these emotions aren't getting processed properly, that produces its own kind of chemicals that then becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's almost like we have, in our culture, we don't necessarily have the place for people to process things in a timely way. We don't have rhythms and rituals like we did, when we were maybe more tribal people, where there was, ecstatic dance, or there was drumming, or there were ways in which we helped to process stuff that was happening on a day-to-day basis. That's been lost, and we're feeling that. And anyway, I just wanted to make a point that, that's why I think having seminars like you do, where people can come together and actually process emotions, is so powerful, JJ. It's such a opportunity for people to work through stuff that's maybe been backed up for months, and not, they have not had the proper, like, psychiatry is not the place right now at this point to, process some of that. It used to be, but it's not necessarily that's the case today.
Agreed. I would also add that I don't even think some of the therapies are really doing us any justice either, because unless you go in knowing what you want and your therapist has multiple tools, somebody can be led down a path for weeks or months sometimes even years where nothing is shifting and changing because we're actually not changing anything. And as
Yeah.
you mentioned, Candace's book, I'm also looking at Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. I
Yes.
just interviewed Dawson Church, who wrote Mind to Matter. And now
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at these neural pathways that have to be established by actually doing something different and taking action in different ways, from EFT and EMDR and hypnosis and NLP,
Meditation. Yes.
meditation. We're looking at how do we actually change our brain through our thoughts. And so again, this whole emotional conversation, I wanted to start the conversation, and thank you for the acknowledgement of the event. This is one of the reasons why I feel the need to do them, because people don't have a place. And just
Yes.
this client, case in point, who's literally feeling uncomfortable, thinks there's something wrong with her physically. And sometimes there is, guys. There's something off. But there are sometimes when you are not used to feeling or allowing yourself to feel a negative emotion that you freak out, which is why we numb. We're a culture of numbing and
Yes.
and imbalance. So let's get back to, though, because again, some of the root problems that I see with a lot of people who are dealing with weight issues, they're on antidepressants, they've gone through menopause, and I know their diet's crap. And this is where we want to link that what you're eating is directly affecting how you're feeling, whether or not there's an emotional component or not. The way your mood, your energy levels, your hormones, how everything is working is based on also what you're putting in your body. So let's talk about some of the worst contributors that really wreak havoc on gut health, which then directly affects how you feel in your mood.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think the key thing is that the gut is a place where a lot of inflammation, builds up, and inflammation is, you know, we've all had a cut, in which maybe there was pus, and then, eventually maybe then there's a scab it's formed. But when it's chronic, where, you're being assaulted with so many of probably a big contributor for many people is their food choices. That's a primary driver of chronic illness. So that's one thing. I mentioned earlier that our gut is, it houses 70% of it's even higher. I think it's more like 85% of our immune system. So, our immune system is, working really hard and maybe overtime to try to be able to offset some of this. But at the same time, it's creating, there's breakdowns that are occurring, and some of the tight junctions that hold the gut intact are starting to open up. It's like Velcro that's like being ripped apart. So things are leaking from the gut into the bloodstream, which then starts a whole cascade of reactions. And then a lot of it is just our gut bacteria. We have a huge microbiome. There's hundreds of microorganisms that, actually outnumber the cells everywhere else in our body by like 10 to 1. And so the gut is basically the keeper of health. So what you put into your mouth, the kind of thoughts that you give every day, the thoughts that you think, all of these things can increase or decrease inflammation. So we can address that by just really taking a closer look at what would be some of the inflammatory contributors. For me, what I see in our practice is it's oftentimes processed foods and food toxins from the diet, like, some of the hydrogenated oils or dyes or, sugar. We did a show on some of the things like emulsifiers and tenderizers and taste enhancers, all these things that are completely foreign to the gut. They don't know what to do with it. So it creates a lot of this inflammation. So, that's where, somebody, if they were looking to improve their health, that's a great place to start. Is, what am I putting into my body? Adding more of the good fats, the good whole foods, the therapeutic foods that can actually help to change the gut below. You can change your gut bacteria in as little as 3 days, JJ, positive and negative.
All right, let's talk about what someone would do. Obviously, we're eliminating things, and what are we adding?
I would say, well, first of all, one food that I would say is, we talked about sugar and we talked about the toxic oils, but I would also say be aware of gluten, gluten-containing grains like rye and barley, and of course wheat. So many of these, particularly wheat, has been so hybridized and genetically modified that it's actually damaging the gut. And we now know that when the little fingers on your gut wall, they're called the villi, start actually depressing and they become more like a Berber carpet, we know that you have less surface area to absorb some of these key nutrients that are critical for making these brain chemicals that are help you feel better. And when that starts to shrink, there's actually a connection in which the brain starts to shrink. So the brain and the gut are so intimately connected. So if you're limiting a wheat, you're eliminating maybe if you're sensitive to dairy, getting rid of that, and then looking at more of the inflammatory sugars, et cetera. Now you want to start looking at adding in some good fats like your avocado and your simple nuts and nut butters. Butter is a phenomenal food for the gut, or ghee if you can't handle the dairy part of it. Wild fish and eggs and pastured meats. Pastured meaning that you're hopefully getting your meat where it says grass-fed or it says grass-finished. So that means that the cattle are actually being raised in proper environment where they're able to chew on grass for most of their life. And then looking at even the traditional fats like olive oil or coconut oil. Obviously, as many vegetables as your body can handle is a great way to help improve the gut bacteria.
I want to address, since a lot of people who have listened to the show for a while know that I'm not 100% dairy free, but I try to avoid and eliminate as much as possible. For those of you that do eat dairy, please, 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 and Jeannie mentioned this at the beginning, if you're going to be eating dairy, please do organic dairy that hasn't been treated by hormones and antibiotics, because there's another situation where if you're just drinking the cheapest milk possible, then you're most likely getting some kind of chemical in that milk that then is also disrupting your gut and changing your brain chemistry. So please, if you're going to have dairy, please make it organic and hormone free and pesticide, just as organic as you can possibly make it. Now, we didn't talk about fermented foods yet.
Oh, we got to do that. What am I, my gosh, how am I missing that? Which, by the way, when you're thinking about dairy, if you have to have dairy, fermented dairy, particularly like JJ said, if it's organic, is fabulous, because many cultures from around the world, I learned early on that when you add certain bacteria into the culture, that it helps to break down the casein and breaks down many of some of these different proteins in such a way that it's so much more digestible. So I make some kefir every week using some kefir grains, and I take the best quality milk. I get it from Clover Dairy, which is fabulous. If I can get raw milk, that's even better. But for many patients who can't handle lactose, the fermented, particularly fermented kefir, can be maybe something that you can handle without some of the negative side effects of building up phlegm or, having some of the inflammation that some people will get in their nasal passages or in their throat. So that, but also fermented vegetables, JJ. We're a big fan of beet kvass and, our cultured sauerkrauts. Every culture around the world discovered that there's just natural cultures that are growing, that are in the air, yeast that are in the air that, live on these vegetables. And then when we chop them up, they're actually then going to work, particularly if we add a little salt to it and we release some of the juices. These bacteria will break things down and we produce a lot of lactic acid. So that's where we get the Lactobacillus acidophilus, that particular culture, which has been shown to actually improve mood. We actually see, like in kimchi, people just naturally in the process of the bacteria that's used to break down that cabbage, we increase GABA. So we actually increase some of these precious chemicals that we now know can alter mood. GABA has a very calming effect, so it's wonderful to incorporate any kind of cultured foods that you can to sort of build up your own bank account of some of these important brain chemicals, important gut chemicals that help us to feel well.
And for those that aren't going to eat the fermented foods because they don't like the taste, we can supplement with probiotics?
Yeah, we can. And I actually always like to explore with patients first, to have them explore a little bit more of some of the cultured foods, partly because in our culture, we're so interested in mostly sweet foods and We like sour foods and salty. But a lot of the cultured foods are a little combination of kind of a little sour and some bitter. And those are good flavors to actually introduce into the diet, even in small amounts, partly because it stimulates the appropriate enzyme production from the liver and from the gallbladder to actually improve digestion. And often what I find is if I just encourage a patient just to keep trying it, even just a bite, even if you don't like it, just stick with it. And a lot of people will tell me 2 weeks later, oh my goodness, I can't believe now I crave that taste. That is not uncommon. So I believe there is a reason why there are 5 common tastes, and each one of them has a purpose. So just like a good mother doesn't give up on her child when they're just resisting vegetables, I'm a good nutritionist because I don't want to give up on my clients if they can reach a point where they might actually find they like the taste of some of these foods.
Well, we did a fermented vegetable show, a video show on Tasty Tuesday Fit to Love, and that's on my YouTube channel, jjflizanes.tv or youtube.com/jjflizanes. Anyway, and I believe it's on both of the playlists, Easy Paleo Gluten and Dairy Free Cooking, as well as Fit to Love Tasty Tuesdays. Jeannie and I have done several cooking
Yes.
shows, and the vegetables were really easy because it literally was vegetables, salt, and water. Okay, guys, that's
Yes.
all. And if you wanted to put some herbs in there, you probably could. So go watch that show or email me and I'll send you the link to it. But jjflizanes.tv is where you can find the beet kvass, the fermented vegetables, and then other recipes that we did, from salads to desserts that are low carb. I did shakes. Anyway, there's like 100 videos on there that are just food based, but that's a great place to start looking at how you can serve your body a little bit better. So I know we've covered what foods to add in and what foods to take out mainly. I want to talk just briefly about coffee for a second and caffeine, because there's a fine line between too much because it causes adrenal fatigue, and then having enough that there are some antioxidants depending on the coffee. There's mold sometimes in coffee. It's a big thing. And eventually I'll talk about that on the show, but I wanted to sort of get your opinion. I have mine. I want to know if we match here on approximately what you would recommend would be the healthy amount of coffee or caffeine in a day, and at what point are we going to adrenal fatigue when we have X amount?
That's a really great question, and it's so individual because we know some people just have strong adrenals. You get your adrenal strength from your mother. So, to a certain extent, some people just had really, they have vital organs and they're producing plenty, even if they drink 3 and 4 cups of coffee. Their sleep isn't being disrupted, and they seem to really thrive. And then we have people who are like the canary in the coal mine. They have a half a cup of coffee and they feel like so jittery and so, confused, and they don't feel comfortable. Something's off. So I think we really have to adjust that based on a lot of the symptoms that people have. I'll just be honest for myself. I use an Aura ring, so I've been tracking my sleep, and I've been looking at, all the different factors that might influence nights when I don't get really good deep sleep. So the ring can actually track your REM sleep and your deep sleep and your different stages of sleep. And I am beginning to recognize, wow, I am really somebody that can only really afford to have 2 cups of coffee. And I make mine half regular, half decaf, so it's really equivalent to 1 cup. And I have to stop by 11. If I have any more than that, then I really notice it disrupts my sleep. So I think it's individual for everybody. I will say that for somebody who I know has adrenal fatigue, I really encourage them to do maybe decaf if they're having trouble weaning themselves off, and then switch over to a green tea. And one of the benefits of green tea for all of us is that, yes, there is a little bit of caffeine in green tea, but there's a lot of L-theanine. And L-theanine is another amino acid that has a very calming effect on the body. So it doesn't tend to give people that jittery effect, JJ, where coffee sometimes gives you that jolt, and raises your blood sugars possibly, and maybe makes you even a little bit hungry earlier if you had a second cup. So, I'll play with, seeing if we can find some choices between some of the white teas or the green teas, and then coffee, and then maybe even modifying coffee just to help people so that, they're able to have their ritual for many people, their coffee or their tea is part of their ritual in the morning, so that they don't feel like they've disrupted that, but that they're not having an impact on their health.
Well, I'm like you. I can't have more than two, and I definitely have to be done by 11. Otherwise, I will not sleep.
Yep.
So I'm
Yeah.
pretty sensitive to that. And even if I have decaf sometimes, that doesn't even matter. Decaf sometimes can be effective for me staying up as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot right now. We're getting these. I mean, I have genetic. I've had several different genetic tests that I've done, and so I see that I don't break down caffeine as efficiently as Alan. Alan, he's able to drink black tea, at nighttime, and he doesn't have any problem with his sleep. So I do feel like there's more to the story than just your adrenals. I think our genetics may be playing a role with your, how you manage caffeine. So so these are things that help us. We look at these symptoms. These are symptoms that are telling us the story. And what I want to say to your audience out there is that your symptoms are powerful information. And what you want is to have a physician that honors your symptoms. And there can be 20 or 30 symptoms. And a good physician is going to listen to every one of those symptoms as a clue. It's a clue to your story on how to get well. And so hold on to that and don't look to, wanting to suppress those symptoms, because that's going to take away from the richness of the story that we can decipher and break down and determine, what are root causes of what's going on with you.
Amen. So to wrap this up, let's talk about if you're someone who's on antidepressants, but you want to get off antidepressants, or if you feel like you need to be on one because you're uncomfortable or unhappy, or you keep classifying yourself as someone with anxiety and depression. Let's look at your gut health. Let's look at your neurotransmitters. Reach out to Jeanne and get that Senesco test. Look at changing your diet to see how it improves it. And then, of course, I'm going to add, please process your feelings. And I don't mean that as a, you guys do it on your own. Reach out to me, come to an event, work with someone that actually does many different therapies, looking at all different aspects of how you process emotions so that you can actually get to the real root of what's going on, not just medicate it again and then create havoc later in both of your health and in your emotional life. So Jeanne does a lot of this work, and I would recommend that everyone listening reach out to her at nourishingwellness.com. Any other information, Jeanne, you can tell them about what you could offer them?
I would just say that if somebody's got deep questions and you are not sure that you just want to pick up the phone and make an appointment, just email me, jp@nourishingwellness. I'm happy to get back and send you some information just to help you get started, or at least maybe to help you find the right people that can help you get started. My husband and I both belong to a functional medicine group. We've got functional medicine practitioners all over the country. So just know I could help you maybe find somebody who could be more on your team. And I want to put a shout out for you, JJ, because I feel like you are doing such a service right now in creating a community that is a missing link right now in terms of our wellness journey. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we lived in communities and tribes, and people were able to be supported. It was just part of what made people feel safe and secure. And now I feel like that's been disrupted in the fact that you now have events, that you have a podcast, you have ways in which people can feel like, I'm connected. I don't feel so alone. That is such a powerful piece of your wellness, to have that sense that I do not feel alone is part of your healing journey. So I applaud you, JJ, for what you're creating in the world. It's a need that's being met. It's a need that can be met for many people if they just tune in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you've been to several of the events so that
Yes.
a lot of the community that listen. And you guys
Yes.
are the reason why we're having this, because you're interested in what we're talking about. A lot of you do show up in some way, whether it be online or live in person at the community, but don't give up and get more involved. I will provide ways for you to do that. But we all need this, as Jeanne said.
Yes.
We need this for a part of our emotional health that a drug or even changing your diet's not going to give you.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I know, Jeanne, you want to refer people out to doctors, and I appreciate that. But I also want them to work with you, because there is no other doctor I know that does the comprehensive amount of work in so many different areas we haven't even talked about: flower essences, homeopathy, all the different things
Yes.
that you do and provide that I don't know anyone
Yes.
else is doing. So please, everyone,
Yeah. Thank you.
Reach out,
Thank you.
JP at
Wellness.
nourishingwellness.com. You can do Skype, you can do the phone, you can have
Yes.
the test sent to her. There's just really no one more qualified on a holistic, well-rounded program than you. So please use Jeannie.
Thank you, Ken. Oh, thank you, JJ. I love it. I love the fact that we've got this support system going for each other. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to reach out if you've got questions that weren't met today. I'd be happy to answer them too.
All right. JP at nourishingwellness.com or nourishingwellness.com to learn more information. Jeannie, again, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.